5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What was that? Yeah. For the countdown gets a round of applause. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful Holistic Advisor Academy. Congratulations on your decision to attend this event, and I know coming into this event, many of you have questions about why you're sitting here in this room today, and I can assure you that by the end of this day and a half, you're going to have all your questions answered. And I also know you're going to feel that this was time well spent and a turning point in your career. And we know that because we've seen it with hundreds of other advisors who have attended this event before you. Now, I want you to take a minute and picture this. It's June of 2010, and you're living in Tampa, Florida. Sunshine, beaches, but you're visiting a friend of yours up in Cleveland, Ohio. And you and that friend are out sitting on his boat, talking about all the things that you like and dislike about working in the financial services industry. Now, 6 months later, fast forward 6 months later, you wake up at 7 a.m. in that same friend's basement, which is now where you're living, right? You spend 30 minutes layering on sets of clothes to prepare for your daily commute to your new office, which is actually the neighbor's house that you've rented and turned into a makeshift office. You pile on these clothes, you walk up that basement stairs, you hit the garage door button, and you look across the street. And separating you from your new office space are 4-foot snowdrifts that, Nan, you know the ones I'm talking about, right? And you think to yourself, what in the heck was I thinking? Well, now, I've heard Jason Smith say on multiple occasions he's not a very good salesperson, which is why he needed to develop a process for the financial planning work that he was doing. But I think we can all agree, anyone who can convince a 26-year-old to move from the beaches and the sunshine of Tampa, Florida, to the basement of a starter home in Avon, Ohio, in January must be pretty darn good at sales, right? Now, early on, when we started the company, we certainly had a lot of ups and downs. We had a group of initial founding partners that were all running their own retail financial planning businesses. And in every waking moment that they had, they spent time packaging all of their wisdom and experience into processes that one day other people would be able to benefit from. Now, if we fast forward 7 years later, the office certainly isn't the same, and the team has grown, but the vision has not changed. And some of you in this room attended and joined this organization 8 years ago. And today, you guys and ladies are the success story that continues to drive this enterprise. Others are here for the first time. And my challenge to you is imagine what your business would be like had you attended this Holistic Advisor Academy 8 years ago. And as you experience and learn all of the different programs and resources you could implement in your business, think about what your business will look like 8 years from today if you take action on what you go through. Now, I mentioned the team earlier, and I was about a year ago at an Ed Slott event, and I was talking to 2 advisors. One of the advisors had been with us for a number of different years, and the other advisor was just learning about what Clarity does. And I was listening to the advisor who had been with us for a number of years sharing about the programs that they've taken from our organization and implemented in the business and the success that they've had. And as I was listening to that advisor, he shared something that really stood out to me, and it's actually something that we've built into the core values of our organization, and we teach it every new team member orientation we do. And he said, the reason that I love working with Clarity is that their team cares as much about my business as I do. Their team cares as much about my business as I do. And I thought that was just such a great kind of cultural fit into what you all will experience over the next day and a half as you get to interact with our team. So speaking of that team, I'm not going to go through and introduce all the amazing individuals on this slide, but there's over 60 individuals that are here for you. We don't consider this our team. We consider this your team. And the one thing I want you to know is that C2P is very serious about investing in individuals that will help you grow your business. Now, we know everybody in this room is at different inflection points in their business. And we've created 4 organizations, 4 companies that these team members all work for day in and day out. These 4 companies are doorways into how you can access the information you're going to learn about over the next day and a half. Clarity to Prosperity is hosting this event. Clarity to Prosperity is focused and passionate about building the best training in the industry for advisors. Advisors can simply pay a fee for the ongoing training that you're going to get to learn about today. Other advisors might decide that they want to align with C2P Advisory Group, which is a fiduciary-focused insurance marketing organization that will help you excel above your competition when utilizing annuities, life insurance, and asset-based long-term care within a holistic financial plan. Valor Capital Management is an institutional money manager that will allow you to leverage a $600 billion Nobel-prized evidence-based investment strategy to help you gather more AUM and deliver a better investment experience to your clients. And last but not least, Prosperity Capital Advisors. Prosperity Capital is a corporate RIA that can provide you with A to Z back office solutions, an open architecture investment platform, and the ability to scale your investment advisory business. And so these are the different doorways, and we're going to explain more about this throughout the next day and a half. Now, I mentioned Jason Smith earlier, and I can go through a laundry list of accolades for this guy. I mean, you could see some of them on the screen. He's the founder and CEO of the J.L. Smith Group. The J.L. Smith Group is located over in Avon, Ohio, about 20 minutes from where we sit. His organization that he built is on track to bring in over $65 million of new client assets this year, and you're going to get to hear more about how they're doing that and meet some of the team members that are responsible for that. He was recognized by Investment News as a top 40 under 40 industry standout, by the Forum 400 as an emerging leader and legend in the industry, and was asked to be a main platform speaker for $1 Million Roundtable's Top of the Table. He's the author of 3 books, The Bucket Plan, which many of you in the room have had the opportunity to read, which has become a bestseller. His first book was actually geared and written for advisors. It's titled An Advisor's Guide to Charging Planning Fees, to help show advisors a path to monetize their wisdom in their process, and also the co-author of The Hiring Advantage with Gina Pellegrini. Now, these accolades are certainly impressive, but I want to share a quick story about Jason. I've had the opportunity to know him for a long, long time. And I was on the phone with an advisor about 7 months ago who was referred over to speak with me. He was thinking about leaving his broker-dealer, frustrated, wanted to talk about just becoming an investment advisor representative. And I'm talking with him about his business. He's sharing with me about what he does. I share with him about what we offer and what we do. And he interrupts me and he says, "You know what, I think I met one of your guys." And I was like, "Oh, do you remember who it was?" And he was like, "No, I can't think of the name. But the only thing I recall is his energy and passion for this industry. It was just contagious. You could tell from speaking to him that he would do anything in his power to help me as an advisor grow, and that he was just passionate about helping make the industry a better place. And I sat back on the phone and I was like, was he like a tall guy with curly hair? And he was like, yeah, he was. And that's absolutely Jason Smith. I can say hands down, I've never met anyone in my life that has more passion for helping advisors who in turn have the ability to change the lives of the clients they're sitting down with. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring up and introduce our visionary, our founder and CEO of C2P Enterprises, Jason Smith.
So I had, my hair was curly when I had more hair.
It was like an afro.
So what are you passionate about? What are you passionate about? Because I'll tell you, I'm passionate about helping advisors become even more successful than they already are. Why? Because the more I help you become successful, the more people that you're going to see and the more American families' lives that you're going to affect and make better. And why? Why is that so important to me? Well, I'd like to share with you a story that really brought me to realize what my passion was and really created a responsibility internally that I feel like I have to give back to this wonderful industry that we're all in. So imagine you're 29 years old. And so this is this is young chubby Jason, right? So imagine you're 29 years old and you have a beautiful wife and daughter. You're having success in the financial services industry. I was making over $500,000 a year. And, I'm feeling pretty invincible. I mean, life is good. Until one evening, I come home and something's not right. My heart's beating out of my chest. It's skipping beats. I'm whisked away in an ambulance. And I'm diagnosed with a heart condition that would require life-threatening open heart surgery. How would you have felt? Well, I wake up the next morning and I realize that if I die on an operating table, my income dies with me for my wife and for my daughter. Unfortunately, I have no life insurance. I'm uninsurable, and my income is made up primarily of first-year commissions. What would you do? Well, what I did is I joined $1 Million Round Table Top of the Table. Just barely qualified at that point at 29 years old. You had to be making $500,000 a year. I barely got in. And then I joined Strategic Coach and Ed Slott and Michael Gerber's E-Myth coaching program and every other coaching and training program that I could get into to try to figure out how can I build the J.L. Smith Group into a company that's going to run successfully with or without me. So I set on this path of building my business, building the J.L. Smith Group. And let's fast forward now to April 17th of 2017, just a little over 2 years ago. I had to have that life-threatening open heart surgery. And I was out 5 months. 5 months of recovery after that surgery. I come back after 5 months, and the J.L. Smith Group had the second most profitable quarter it had ever had in the history of the company without me. Now, I have mixed feelings about that. But what I want you to ask yourself is, if you were to take 5 months off from your business, what would it look like when you came back? What would your business look like if you took 5 months off? So you might be saying to me, listen, Jason, why are you telling me this story? How's this relevant to me? Well, how it's relevant to you is, over the next 2 days, you're going to see the processes, the programs, and the people that you have available to you to be able to build the same thing for yourself and for your family and your business. And that's why I wanted to share that story. Now, and by the way, so while I'm recovering, right, imagine the surgery's April of 2017. June of 2017, my wife has our second set of twins in the last 4 years. And this is also my 21-year-old daughter up here on the screen. So I'm really excited to share with you why I'm so passionate about this business and about helping all of you succeed. See, I feel like I have an obligation to give back. This industry has helped me, has helped my family, of building the J.L. Smith Group, and so many of these ideas are going to come and came from all the people that you're going to meet over the next 2 days, the speakers, my business partners, coaches, mentors, people that are available for you to plug into. And even you'll see tomorrow at noon, we're going to have our existing mastermind members, a part of Clarity to Prosperity, that'll start joining us. And so many of these ideas and processes and programs came from them as well.
So this pyramid really helps kind of exemplify what Jason just shared as resources to you. It's amazing, about 8 years ago, we were sitting in his office, and we said, what if we can draw one picture of what C2P really represents to advisors, to you guys sitting in this room? And as we mapped this out, the foundation of the pyramid really started with practice management, marketing, adding profitable business lines to the financial services practice, right? Not just relying, as Jason mentioned, on first-year commissions or advisory fees or one business line, but adding multiple profitable business lines.
One of the things I'm most passionate about is simplifying the financial planning process, because that is one of the things that is going to enable you to be most successful. See, what I find is there's really two types of advisors in this industry. And there's the advisors that are primarily made up in this room, I know. They're the more sophisticated advisors. And so, but sometimes when you become sophisticated and you do a great job of educating yourself and you have all these capabilities, you want to share it with the clients, and sometimes you overcomplicate things. Sometimes you talk over their head. Sometimes you don't realize how sophisticated you are, and you make it confusing for the client, which ultimately holds them back from being empowered to make a decision. And then you have another group of advisors who are the relationship people. They're fantastic at building relationships. They're great at sales because they leverage that ability to connect and build those relationships. And maybe they built their career in large part on transactional business. They were selling products and portfolios that were great for the client, but it was really transactional. It wasn't as sophisticated or holistic as it could be. And see, so what we strive to do is to simplify the financial planning process, both for the more sophisticated advisors that sometimes can complicate things that thinking, the louder the thunk makes, when the 80-page report hits the desk, the better the financial plan. And that's just not the case, right? So how do we simplify it for those advisors? And that's what we help you do. You're already successful. If you're in this room, you are already successful. We just want to help you become even more successful. And then what we do is we take those advisors that historically have been transactional, and we're going to show you how to be a little bit more planning focused. Transition from selling the product to selling the process. Because ultimately the process will sell the product.
Yeah, I was certainly one of those ones that was guilty of thinking a 100-page financial plan was amazing and Microsoft Excel was my best friend, right? And I remember the first time that I saw the holistic planning process, which you're going to get to see in a minute. And it was in Jason's office, and I looked over at the whiteboard, and I saw these 3 simple buckets: a now bucket, a soon bucket, and a later bucket. And I remember how profound it was for the simplification factor, right? I think a lot of times people think simplicity means a lack of sophistication, and Leonardo da Vinci would, I guess, argue the other way. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, right? How many times in your mind have you lost deals, lost really good prospective clients because you confused them or overcomplicated it? And that's what I saw when I saw his whiteboard at the J.L. Smith Group over a decade ago.
Now, one of the other big advantages, other than if you're one of those advisors that sometimes, because of your sophistication, can make it a little confusing, you're right, overcomplicate things. Or maybe you're one of those advisors who are, have had great success in the relationship business, but primarily transactional, and you want to be a little bit more planning focused. Either way, this is what it's going to have. This process will help you become better in both of those areas. But the other thing it does is for those of you who want to build a business similar to that I have at the J.L. Smith Group, which is a self-managing company that runs profitably with or without me. If that's an aspiration that you have, what this process is going to do is it gives you the ability to really outsource your training, right? You can leverage us, you can leverage our team, you can leverage our live training events and our online university e-learning platform and all our mentors and our team of CFPs. You can outsource that training to be able to bring in junior or associate advisors to plug into your practice that can, maybe that's part of your business succession plan. Or maybe you just want to grow. Maybe you just want to add more advisors to grow and grow into the future. Having a systematized process is going to allow you to really add efficiency and add scalability to your business.
So in this first section, we're going to go through a couple learning objectives. The first thing that we're going to cover is we go into the bucket plan best interest process. And when we say the bucket plan best interest process, we've taken the philosophy of the bucket plan and we've built all of the tools that will allow you to streamline the efficiency of taking your prospect through this process to ultimately become a client, or to potentially take an existing client through this process to put a bucket plan in place for them. So what we're going to cover in this morning session is how do you simplify that financial planning process? How do you simplify it so that they can understand and it's easy for them to say, yes, I want to move forward and implement with you? How do you understand how to create the need for the bucket plan? This is sales 101, right? We learned this a long time ago. You have to create the need before you provide the solution. And a lot of times, salespeople far too often jump right into their solution because they're really excited about it before they actually create the need. And last but not least, if you're running this process, you're going to learn how to bulletproof your practice by documenting the evidence that you've met the best interest standard. bulletproof your process, bulletproof your practice, and be able to demonstrate that you acted as a fiduciary and met that best interest standard.
And that's why we call this a best interest process. Because ultimately, also the client wants to know that you're acting in their best interest. So let's put it front and center, that it is a best interest process. Now, what it really does, though, at the end of the day, this is a sales process. This is a sales process for all of us to plug into that is going to add efficiency and effectiveness and increase your closing ratio, but do it in a fiduciary way. Do it in a fiduciary way. And so what I want to share with you is so the best interest standard, just kind of definition. So we had so much confidence in the fact that this process will help you meet that best interest standard and document the evidence that you did so, that when the DOL rule came out a couple years ago, we actually contacted the DOL and we contacted the SEC and asked if we could present what we're going to present to you in the next 30 minutes directly to them. We wanted to show them this is what we're doing, and we want the confidence that what we're teaching advisors is meeting the best interest standard. Now, what we come to learn is, they're not going to give you like a stamp of approval or a certificate, right, that you're going to put up on the wall. But what the SEC actually said to us is, well, I'll tell you what we will do. And it got us a little bit nervous. They said, we're going to send you a deficiency letter if it doesn't. And so we went ahead and we made this presentation.
Our compliance attorney was like, you guys are crazy. You don't offer this stuff if they don't ask for it.
Yeah. So our chief compliance officer, highly advised against it. And we have a new chief compliance officer. And Jennifer, I'll listen to you, promise. But long story short, we did it because we did believe so strongly. So what's the best interest standard? So when you look from a definition standpoint, there's three components to it. And number one, and we pulled this from SEC and DOL, and I understand the new regulation. Actually, Jennifer's going to address that a little bit tomorrow. So for those of you who want some clarity on the new regulation that'll go into effect next June, Regulation BI. But prudence, individualization, and loyalty. So first, prudence. Care, skill, prudence, diligence that a prudent person familiar with such matters would use. What does that mean? That means you better know what you're doing. That's all that means, right? On the Department of Labor website, they literally had the quote that a pure heart and an empty head are not enough. A pure heart and an empty head are not enough. That's all it's saying. You got to know what you're doing. You can't say, oh, didn't know better. If somebody else would have knew better, then you should have known better. That's what prudence means. Second, individualization based on investment objectives, risk tolerance, etc. Listen, that's financial planning 101. Individualization is just doing financial planning, not doing traditional transactional business, doing more planning-based business. That's what individualization is. And the third component is loyalty. So the loyalty one, without regard to the financial or other interests of the advisor. So on the loyalty, to me what that means is if you're somebody who really loves annuities, you do a lot of annuity business. We'll use annuities first as an example, then AUM. So let's say you just love annuities, you do a lot of annuities, right? And so now, all of a sudden, you do a $500,000 rollover, you roll it over into an annuity, you get your 6% commission, whatever it is, and you go on your way. And now, all of a sudden, they come back, and the kids, say, oh, you shouldn't have put my parents in this, and things are getting questioned, and you have to answer the questions as to why you did the annuity. You better be able to prove that you did that annuity through documentation that was in the best interest of the client, that fit into the plan, not just because you wanted to make your 6% commission, right? But be able to have the documented evidence to prove and back up why you did that annuity. Secondly, Let's say you're somebody, it's like, you know what, I love the 1% trail on AUM forever. I know the valuation of my practice and what it does, and I believe in the market and over the long haul, 1% trail on AUM, that's the way I'm going, right? And so you do that same $500,000 rollover into AUM. And now the market's down 50%. And now your client's driving on the highway and they see the billboard. You know, did your advisor act in your best interest? Call us, call the 800 number. And they're calling because their account's down 50%. And the smooth attorney is talking them into, let's see if they acted in your best interest. You're down 50% in your accounts, right? And so you better be able to document the evidence that you made that recommendation and it met the loyalty standard. You didn't do it for your own interest, you did it because it fit into the plan. Why am I sharing this with you? Because this is what you're gonna see in these tools that we've built around the philosophy of bucketing. Now, bucketing's been around a long, long time, long before we had the bucket plan, right? So bucketing philosophy's been around a long time. But what we've done is we've built a best interest process around it. And it starts with the fact finder.
So this fact finder is one of the most incredible tools that we've produced at this organization. And it really is a culmination of a journey Jason's been on for the last 20 years to interview every top advisor he's met at Strategic Coach and Forum 400 and Top of the Table and FMO conferences and RIA conferences to ask them one simple question. Would you mind sharing with me your fact finder? Or would you mind sharing with me what are the best questions you ask your prospect in that first meeting? And I've seen it in his office. I mean, he had this stack of old fact finders from all these advisors highlighting all these questions of what to ask, how to ask, and when to ask. And this is not a traditional fact finder like maybe we were taught when we entered the financial services industry of you just need to ask these questions. And it's certainly not just like a suitability or compliance document. There's so much sales psychology built into this fact finder to help completely differentiate you from any other advisor that clients ever met. It's really focused first on the goals, the objectives, and the values of that prospect, long before we ever go in and say, well, how much money do you have in your 401k and what's your income? So the purpose of the fact finder is to be a guide through the appointment process to differentiate you from any other experience that they've had and give you all of the knowledge for you to best do your job, right? That individualization that Jason mentioned in the best interest definition.
In your binder, we actually pulled some great questions from the fact finder to give to you for attending the event. So you can see it's in that tab of some really powerful questions that you can start to incorporate into your first appointment when you get back to your practice. So you can, that should be there in your binder. I want to share with you one of the key components, which is the concerns and priorities worksheet. So the concern, and Aaron, what tab is that? Is that tab 1 then in their binder, the powerful questions? Yep. Tab 2? Okay.
Tab 2, thank you.
Yep. So I want to share with you a component of the fact finder that's one of the most powerful components, and it's called the Concerns and Priorities Worksheet. So what we do is one of the questions we ask is we'll ask, first we ask about their goals and kind of what they're looking to accomplish over the next 3 years. And then what we do is we ask, are there any concerns, fears, dangers, anything that might hold you back from reaching those goals that you stated? Hypothetically, if there were something that kept you up at night, what might that be? And we ask that question to tee up this exercise where we have the two of these printed. Imagine a husband and wife sitting in front of you. And so we slide them over to both the husband and wife. And we say, we've been asking this question for some time now. And what I'd like you to do is just kind of scan through. These are some of the most common answers we've gotten. And so I'd like to understand if these are important to you. And so if this is important to you, circle it as a number one if it's a top concern or priority. If it's not a concern or priority at all, just circle a number 3. And if it's important, but it's not quite a number 1, just go ahead and circle it a number 2. And it takes like 2-3 minutes, and they go through the exercise. And it's things like running out of money or paying too much taxes or the nursing home, wiping out the estate, probate, etc. Things that we can help them with, right? And so now what we've done is we've made it all about them, not about us, right? This is what you call consultative selling. It's where you're really making it all about them. And we go deeper. We'll ask probing questions. Why is that important to you? Why'd you circle that as a number 1? Tell me more about that. You know, John, you circled it as a number 1. Sally, you circled it as a number 3. Let's talk about that. Why is it a 1 to you? Why is it a 3 to you? The conversations that you will have, game over. Those people are moving forward with you because you're getting to their pain points, you're getting to their priorities, their agenda, what's most important to them. You make it all about them. So now this is the 6 steps of the core. We're doing the fact finder throughout. So the fact finder is data gathering that happens throughout. It's in the first appointment, it's in the second, and so on. But these are the 6 main components from a process standpoint that you're going to go through throughout the process, all the way to the end when you design a customized bucket plan in step 6 for the client, where you're going to design a customized bucket plan and make product and portfolio recommendations within the 3 buckets. Let's start with 1 and 2, the money cycle and the bucket plan philosophy. So sales 101, you have to create the need before you provide the solution. A big part of creating the need is the concerns and priorities worksheet that we just talked about and the fact finder that has a myriad of powerful questions throughout it and a sequence to ask those questions that from a psychological standpoint makes a lot of sense and has been proven to work through the years. But let's talk about educating them on the money cycle and the bucket plan philosophy.
So on the money cycle, we'll generally do this as we start concluding the questions of the fact finder. And I always like to kind of just stage it with a simple transition, like, hey, Walter, thank you so much for sharing that information with me. And I have to commend you. You've done a great job at saving for retirement. You've done a great job going through what we call the accumulation phase of the money cycle. Are you familiar with the money cycle, Walter? No? Yeah, it's okay. Most people aren't. And really with the money cycle, there's 3 phases. When you're younger, you're working, you're saving, you're accumulating as much as you possibly can to ultimately be able to retire one day. That's what we call the accumulation phase. In the accumulation phase, you can afford to take on more risk or volatility with your investments because you have a long time horizon before you're going to need to access that money. And you're still working. So if you make a more speculative investment and it goes to 0, you still have an employment paycheck, right? Or if you make an investment in the market and the market has a big correction like it did in 2008, you've got time to let it recover. But when you enter a time frame of about 5 to 10 years out from retirement, at this point, you're financially sound, you've built a nice nest egg, you don't have as much of a time horizon in front of you before you're going to need to access the money. We call this the preservation phase. You're preserving a portion of your money in which you're going to need to rely upon for income in the 3rd and final phase, which is distribution. Distribution to yourself in and through retirement, and distribution to your family amongst your passing. And the biggest mistake that we see people make is they go right from accumulation into distribution. They never take the time to preserve a portion of the money that they're going to need to rely upon through that first phase of retirement. And now we've been on this great bull market, 10 years of kind of economic prosperity, at least in the stock market. And the last time we saw a major market correction was 2008. Now, I don't know if you remember, but in 2006 and 7, there was all these individuals that spent 20, 30, 40 years working, saving, building their life savings. And in 2006, guess what they thought? Smooth sailing. I've saved enough money, I can retire and live the rest of my life. And then what happened? 2008. In some cases, they lost 30, 40, even up to 50% of their nest egg. And they realized they no longer had enough to last them 20, 30 years into retirement. And when you turned on the news in 2009, what were you hearing stories of? All of these 65 to 70-year-olds who now, because of the recession, had to go back and try to find work, right? And it's purely because they went right from accumulation into distribution. They never took the time to preserve a portion of their money that they were going to need to rely upon for income. Because did the market recover after 2008? Does the market always recover after a correction, historically? Right? But it's those that don't preserve a portion that are going to need to rely upon it for that distribution phase that are the ones who are really hurt.
So the money cycle, this is also a handout in your binder, and we actually also laminated it for you. We want you to use these tools when you get back to your business. And so this is in your binder, and so what we want, this is high level, because we want you to have the confidence to actually go back and use it. We're actually going to do a little exercise here next. We're going to do a little bit of a role play. So those in the back
Get the blood
of the room,
flowing.
let's make sure that everybody's got somebody to do the role play with. So we're gonna break off in twos and just do a quick little 2-minute exercise. So basically what you want to do is you just want to simply explain there's 3 phases to the money cycle: accumulation, preservation, and distribution, right? And as we explained, accumulation phase is when you're younger, working, preparing for retirement. You have a long time horizon before you're going to need to access those funds. You can afford to take on more risk. In the accumulation phase, the second phase is preservation, where you start to preserve a portion of the assets in preparation for the third and final phase, distribution. Distribution to yourself in retirement, distribution to your family upon your passing. The biggest mistake people make is they go directly from accumulation into distribution. They never preserve a portion of the assets they're going to draw from in the first phase of retirement. So let's go ahead and do this real quick. I want you to get comfortable with that laminated document because we want you to use it. We want you to have success when you get back to your practice. So let's break off in twos. Make sure everybody's got somebody next to them.
It's right in tab number 2.
All right. So just do a quick run through, explain the 3 phases and the biggest mistake.
All right.
Okay. Let's get started back up again. Well, I sincerely hope that you go back and you start using that in your practice. And this is also in your binder too, this visual. What the money cycle does is it sets up the conversation to explain the bucket plan philosophy as the solution. See, for those people that are going to have to draw off their liquid investable assets in retirement, the money cycle is just another way to explain sequence of returns risk, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, right? It's a simplified way to explain it. Doesn't mean you can't use other tools to reinforce it, but simple way to explain it, and it sets up the bucket plan philosophy. So the bucket plan philosophy, once you've explained, the biggest mistake people make is they go directly from accumulation into distribution, and they never preserve a portion of the assets they're going to draw from in the first phase of retirement. So what's the solution? A simple 3-bucket approach that we subscribe to: now, soon, and later. See, the now bucket is your safe and liquid money. It's your emergency fund. It's any large planned expenses you have on the horizon. It's money that you want to allocate to the bank. You don't want to invest that money or take risk on it because it's the money so you can put your head on the pillow and sleep soundly at night knowing that it's there. That's the now bucket. The soon bucket is the money that you may need to access sooner rather than later. It's that money you're going to draw from in that first phase of retirement. So we have to take a more conservative approach with that money so we can confidently draw income or withdrawals from that money in the first phase of retirement. And see, now that we've established a now and a soon bucket, we can confidently invest the rest of the money in the later bucket for long-term growth and legacy planning. And see, you know, my clients will say to me, Jason, hey, legacy planning, I'm not worried about the kids. Whatever's left is left. But see, legacy planning is not just for the kids. It's most importantly for the surviving spouse. Because when one spouse passes away, what happens to income? If they both are on Social Security, what happens? Right? They lose a check, right? Income goes down. But what happens to their income taxes when one spouse passes away? The surviving spouse is now a single filer, half the standard deduction, all the brackets shrink, income taxes go up for a surviving spouse, but yet income goes down. It's a double whammy. And that's why we have to plan. Legacy planning is not just for the kids, it's most importantly for the surviving spouse. And listen, guys and gals, when you explain this to your prospective clients, set it up with the money cycle, talk about the simple 3-bucket approach, they will want to move forward with you because they'll want their own bucket plan. What are they thinking? 2 things they're thinking after that conversation. Number 1, I don't have a soon bucket. I don't have a soon bucket. Number 2, they're thinking, I never thought about legacy planning for the surviving spouse. Income goes down, taxes go up. We got to address that. And they're going to move forward with you.
So the next section...
Dave, if you wouldn't mind, I just want to add, before joining C2P, my office, we did about 6 to 8 million of new assets that we gathered each year. And since implementing not only the processes, but primarily this bucket plan philosophy and the conversations that you can have around the clients, we've gathered over 35 million in new assets last year. We're on track to gather over 40 million this year. And that's probably one of the biggest fundamental things in our practice that has allowed us to do it. Just that simplicity, the concept, they get it, they understand it, they want to have that soon bucket, and it's been integral to the growth of our business. So I just wanted to emphasize how significant that little aspect can be.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
So to build the bucket plan, there's some tools that we interactively go through with the client. The first is the asset sheet questionnaire. This is more in-depth data gathering. This is different than the fact finder because now we're going into details about what they own. We're finding out account titling. We're finding out cost basis and fees. We're finding out beneficiaries and beneficiary designations. Are they per stirpes? Are they per capita? We're finding out all of the detailed information that we must have before we can make recommendations. And so this allows us to inventory and document everything that they have based on tax qualification.
And I want to share with you a little part of it that we created. I've been at Ed Slott Advisors, I mentioned, for a long time, and Ed Slott's become a personal friend of mine. And so I created this with Ed Slott, and we were kind of brainstorming, and he said something that kind of rang a bell, and then I grabbed him after he got off stage, and we started talked about it later that night. And so we built this into the asset sheet questionnaire. So I'll just tell you a quick story about how I use this. Liability section comes right after the debt section on the asset sheet questionnaire. So filling out the asset sheet questionnaire, so I'm wrapping up a plan. So Bill and Sandy, So Bill's about 70 years old. His wife, Sandy's a couple years younger. And Bill, and I know all of you have had this type of client, right? Bill is a very proud man. He's a very proud man, and he's very proud of the fact that he's got no debt. He's paid everything off, and he's talking about his son and his daughter-in-law and how they spend all this money and they go on these vacations and they live in this fancy house and they live paycheck to paycheck and they have all this debt, but Bill will never buy anything until he has the money to pay for it, right? And he's proud that he has no debt. And so I get to the point in the asset sheet questionnaire, and I'm asking him about liabilities. And I start the conversation, and I say, Bill, I understand you don't have any debt, but I said, what about any liabilities? And he said, well, what do you mean? And I start to explain, before I even can get it out of my mouth, he's like, that sounds like debt. I told you I don't have any debt. And I said, all right, Bill, well, let me ask you a question, though. You know that IRA money you have, that you guys have accumulated? He had about $800,000 in IRA money. And he said, yeah. I said, well, I know you don't like debt. Let's say that you and Sandy decide you want to buy a house down in Florida, right? And so you decide you're going to cash in that IRA to go buy the house, your dreams down in Florida as a vacation home. Let me ask you a question, Bill. If you were to cash in that $800,000 IRA tomorrow, and I know you're not going to do this, but let's say you did, what percentage do you think you would owe in taxes on that $800,000 IRA? He kind of sat there for a minute, and he kind of shifted a little uncomfortably in his chair, and he did the math, and he said, I don't know, probably about 40%. I said, okay, well, what's 40% of $800,000? He said, well, about $320,000. I said, all right. I said, Bill, that's the debt that you owe to the federal government. Whether you pay it or your wife pays it or your kids pay it, somebody's got to pay that debt. That's called the liability, right? And I said, and so the question is, you're in a partnership with the federal government. You are in a partnership with the federal government. How do you get out of a partnership? So all of a sudden, Sandy jumps in. And she's like, well, hey, I was watching this Lifetime movie, and these two brothers were in a partnership, and the one brother killed the other brother to get out of the partnership. And then Bill's like, hey, don't get any ideas, we're in a partnership. And so we all laugh. And so then I said, well, in all seriousness, I said, you got to buy them out. And there are ways and there are programs that you can qualify for pennies on the dollar. You can buy the government out of the partnership you're in with them. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do in our future meetings.
Think about how powerful that conversation is with the elimination of the stretch also, right? I mean, it is going to be a game changer to go back and document that with your clients. So the next step is the income gap assessment. This is when you're working with pre-retirees or retirees, and you're trying to determine how much they're going to need to draw from their liquid investable assets to live on through retirement. Now, quick show of hands, how many people here love budgeting with your clients? Like 2 people.
There are a few.
A couple people do. Most people hate budgeting. Most advisors hate budgeting. Most clients hate budgeting. Most people hate the word budget. And so the income gap assessment is a different way to get to that number without having to go through a full-fledged budget.
It's based on the consumption methodology. American College teaches it, even the RICP course. It's the consumption methodology of how to get to the number. What's the number they need to draw off liquid investable assets?
Now, I'm not going to go through the whole income gap assessment here, but I want to show you a key piece at the bottom. So at the bottom of this income gap assessment, it says, so we get to the number, right? They need $25,000 a year to live off of from their investable assets. The next question, and this was a great innovation that came from Greg Hammer one day, is how much of your income gap would you want guaranteed in your financial plan? How much of your income gap would you want guaranteed in your financial plan? And what do you think they say? Sometimes they say all of it. What else could they say? Some of it, half of it. You know what the other most common answer besides all of it is? Dave, what do you mean? Right? Could you see that happening? So Jason, when they say, Jason, what do you mean? What do you tell them?
Well, there's only 3 ways that we can guarantee income. We can guarantee income through the bank. We could build a CD ladder, and I'll ask them if they're familiar with a ladder and explain that to them. So we could build a CD ladder and guarantee it through the bank. Secondly, we could guarantee income through the government. We could build a government bond ladder. Or thirdly, we could guarantee income through an insurance company like pensions do. So my question for you would be, do you have a preference of any of these 3 strategies, or do you just want the one that's going to give you the highest potential rate of return?
Now, in that financial plan, are you selling them on how much they should put in, or are they telling you how much they might want to have? It's consultative, right? You're building this together.
The key is, though, and again, going back to the billboard story, right? All of a sudden the market's down 50% and they're seeing a billboard. Did your advisor act in your best interest? Document it. Ask them the question how much they want guaranteed, right? And regardless if you use an annuity or a CD ladder or government bond ladder, or you explain to them we could use corporate bond ladder, we don't have guarantees, but you know, all those things you can educate them, but the bottom line is have the conversation. Have the conversation if they want that guaranteed mailbox money coming in, right? Some people want that steady paycheck. And you don't want to have that conversation when the market's down of, you should probably stop drawing off your accounts, right? Have that conversation and document it.
So the next step is identifying their volatility tolerance analysis. And so most of us have used a risk assessment. Maybe we're currently using one. But the problem with the traditional risk assessment is they don't take a bucketing philosophy, right? There's all kinds of cool technology out there with risk assessments, but at the end of the day, the client answers 10, 15, 20 questions, and it comes out and says, you're a moderate investor, or you're an aggressive investor. Well, are they moderate or aggressive in their soon bucket, or are they moderate or aggressive in their later bucket? And this was a challenge if you're doing bucket planning. Traditional risk assessments just don't work. And so we created the volatility tolerance analysis, because at the end of the day, a lot of us aren't really selling risky investments that could go to zero, but we certainly are using products and strategies and portfolios that have volatility. So changing that name, but then scoring the buckets separately. Jason mentioned the now bucket. That's just money in the bank. We don't need a score for that. But the soon bucket and the later bucket, we need to identify how much volatility is the client comfortable with accepting in each of those buckets. So 5 simple questions on the soon bucket, and the client establishes a risk score or a volatility category. 7 questions on the later bucket. So they score stable in the soon bucket. They score growth in the later bucket. And now we've got an overall picture of how each of those buckets could be allocated. It leads you right into having documentation, which is going to support the evidence around why you made the recommendations that you made, and gives you all of the information that you need at this point to go into the last and final step, which is actually designing their customized bucket plan.
Let me show you just a real simple example, right? So their now bucket, we walk them through, identify that magic number, right? That they put on their head on the pillow at night. It's $35,000 in this example. They got a total of $865, right? They want to upgrade their car, right? They want to trade in their car. They need an extra $15,000. They don't want to make a payment. So we put that in the now bucket. So they got a total of $50,000. They're not retiring for a couple years, so we don't need income because their work is providing the income. Now, if they were retiring right now, we'd have a third component in the now bucket, which would be a year's worth of income. In the soon bucket, let's say their income gap was $25,000 a year. If and you're going to learn about this in 2 presentations from now, but we use a bridge methodology in some instances where we buy a temporary bridge of income. So let's say we're going to buy a 10-year bridge. $25,000 a year is the income gap times 10 years income, $250,000 we put in the soon bucket. Then we build an inflation hedge. So we're using some of the IRA money to diffuse that tax time bomb. For the surviving spouse, we're going to use IRA money first in most instances. I mean, every plan is different. But in this plan, we're using the IRA money. And so to leave the good money out in the later bucket if there's non-qualified money. So we have $312,500. So what are we using for that? Well, if they said they wanted to guarantee the income, maybe we use an annuity for income, right? To give them the $25,000 a year to use for free withdrawals. And then they scored stable, maybe we use a stable portfolio with the inflation hedge of Sally's money. The rest of the money, quite simply, goes out in the later bucket. So you have the remaining balance of Joe's IRA, you have the remaining balance of Sally's IRA, and you have their joint non-qualified account that goes out in the later bucket. We have a total of $502,500. Anybody remember, what did they score in the later bucket on the volatility tolerance analysis? Growth, that's right. So what are we going to invest it in? In a growth portfolio, right? Primarily equities in the later bucket because we bought a time horizon to let the market do what it does between the now and the soon bucket.
Think about the sophistication behind this simple plan. We coordinated required minimum distribution planning out of the soon bucket to eliminate sequence of returns risk. We protected and guaranteed their income for at least a decade. We did tax analysis that with $25,000 of income out of IRAs, and let's call it $30,000 of Social Security income, they're in a 0% tax bracket. We segmented the after-tax money in the later bucket so that if one of the spouses were to pass away or both were, their kids would get a step up in basis. Like all of this planning that we do day in and day out is packaged into these 3 simple buckets as a deliverable to the client.
Look at the sophistication that's behind the simplicity that the client sees in the simple 3-bucket approach.
The investment planning statement, this basically just sums everything up. This is the documentation we recommend keeping on file. It basically goes through some of the key data from the fact finder, the asset sheet, the income gap, the volatility tolerance analysis, summarizes it into a couple-page document. You sign off on it, the client signs off on it, and guess what you have now? You've bulletproofed your recommendations because it was a consultative process and you have everything documented on why you made the recommendations that you've made.
Pete, you have a question? Pete?
Yeah, when you go back to your bucket example, it works out great. There's a lot of money in the later bucket. There's no problems.
Yeah.
But what, in reality, when you're doing plans, sometimes there might not be much money left there. Right. I wonder what tool do you use to sort of make sure that's going to grow to be big enough so that you're going to be okay in the future?
Yep, great question, Pete. So one of the things to look at and an easy indicator, if you're using a bridge methodology, and we've back-tested this in every financial planning software you can think of, if you're talking to people in their mid-60s, in that age range, if the later bucket doesn't equal at least what the soon bucket equals, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. And what you'll also find is that means they're probably in that range where they're withdrawing 4% or more of their liquid investable assets, which we know the 4% rule. But I mean, a good indicator is if the later bucket is not enough to at least match the soon bucket.
And there's a day-and-a-half training just on this, that we go through all these examples because there's also different strategies. As he mentioned, there's a lifetime income strategy. There's a portfolio yield strategy that you could implement out of the soon bucket. And so a lot of it depends on how you arrive on what strategy you're going to implement also.
So this is the high level of the 6 steps, the fact finder and the 6 kind of sequential steps we go through. In your workbook, we gave you these tools because we want you to go back and start using this to simplify bucket planning for your clients. And then we're just going to close out a couple kind of debrief thoughts.
So we want to make this a little interactive. You could just shout out an answer, but how do you create the need for the soon bucket? Remember what we went over? Who said it? Money cycle, right? Money cycle creates the need. You must have attended the bucket plan training.
And anybody else, if you want to, what was the biggest insight that seeing this process step by step? In this presentation, what was kind of like your biggest aha moment? Anybody? Yeah, Craig?
Sadly, preservation stage. I've used accumulation and distribution, and I've had people really thought we had a good meeting. They said, okay, I'll see you in a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
I messed up.
That's great. The preservation stage. That's fantastic. Why is it important for your clients to have a soon bucket? Why is that important? Comfort. Yep. Sequence of returns, right, to mitigate that risk in a financial plan. What type of prospect will you use the money cycle on? All of them. And especially if they're going into retirement or already retired. If they're in that red zone, 5 to 10 years out from retirement or already retired, what if they don't have an income need, right? Is the money cycle still relevant? Doesn't life get in the way sometimes and they have unexpected income or withdrawals they have to take out of their portfolios? Isn't there required minimum distributions that can also cause sequence of returns risk? Because then they have to pull it out and pay tax on that money? All right. Matt?
Hey everybody. So my name is Matt Smith. I'm the Director of Business Development with C2P. I'm going to be your MC for the remainder of the event. I'm a big fan of the bucket plan. That's one of my favorite parts about C2P, but I'm even more of a fan that they believe in taking a lot of breaks at these conferences, because I know they can get pretty long. So we are going to actually take a break right now. If we can get you guys back in here at 9:50, you can use the bathroom, get some drinks. But what we're also going to do is be taking opportunity to give you guys some prizes. You might have seen some of these prizes over here. I think I saw a Yeti, Echo, Amazon Dot, whatever they are. So if you guys can be back in here at 9:50, we're going to spin a wheel, and I'm going to draw a name out of the bowl over there. But you got to be in the room, and then we want you to come up and give us an interesting or fun fact about yourself if your name is drawn and you win a prize. So if we could have everybody back here at 9:50, we would appreciate that.